Hello and welcome to another chat. This one's quite topical. A new video's been released. It's Russian special forces advertising some of their highlights from last year, basically. So it's a propaganda video. The question that arises are they using Western equipment when attacking Ukrainian ships? Spoiler alert, they are. That's why it's interesting. So I'm a defense analyst, H.I. Sutton. This video is unscripted, unedited. That's already obvious, I'm sure. Let's get on with it. So it's a propaganda video. I'm not going to play it here, but you can find it on Russian sources. Like I say, it's a highlight reel. There's several attacks, usually with drones, but one of the attacks in particular is involving combat swimmers. That's the general term for Navy or Special Forces divers, essentially. And they're using a limpet mine to attack a Ukrainian ship. Question, are they using Western equipment? Stepping back a moment, the Russian military, going back to Soviet times, has a strong tradition of underwater sabotage, and their combat swimmers have traditional Russian or Soviet designed equipment. It's quite different from what the West was using at the same time. So they've got rebreathers, those green objects on their backs, breathing apparatus, basically. The rebreather circulates the oxygen so it doesn't create bubbles. They're wrestling with a swimmer delivery vehicle. That's a Sirena. It's basically like a big torpedo. Two guys sit inside torpedo, quite crazy. But they feel they're equipped differently to their Western counterparts. However, the Russian military has undergone something of a visual transformation in the last few years. If you look at the Russian army that attacked in Georgia in 2008, it was very different from the Western militaries at the same time. However, if you look at the army that invaded Ukraine in 2022, it looks more similar to Western militaries. Now, the depth of that transformation and the different equipment and the equipment standards and things like that, there's other people who can analyze that. But the observation stands. On the right, we've got soldiers who, some of them are equipped with body armor, some of them might have optics, cameras, helmets, etc. Even their camouflage schemes. Generally speaking, more Western influenced. The same is true on the special forces front, or particularly on the special forces front, even, and in the underwater arena. This is Special Forces diver, a combat swimmer, from 2020, so before the war started, and you can see that they're wearing mostly Western equipment. They've got a French rebreather, possibly a Polish dry suit. The helmet is either US designed or certainly influenced by US designs. The attachment that's hanging down between his legs is actually a clip that goes onto a diver propulsion vehicle to stop him falling off the back, basically. And that's a German supplied Rotinor model. The only thing that is Russian that's substantial is the weapon. And we can tell that from the magazines. This generally applies today in Ukraine as well. Just the vehicle that I said he was attached to, that's the Rotinor Divejet here, is actually the same as is used by quite a few Western special forces. It's particularly suitable in rivers where there's fast currents. It's also similar to the civilian sea bob. If you're a billionaire and you have a yacht, you might have some sea bobs aboard. A lot of this equipment, the Western equipment, was supplied just before the Sochi Olympics. So the Sochi Olympics in 2014 gave Russia the excuse and the opportunity to source Western special forces equipment to improve the security of the Olympics. In practice, it meant that their special forces could get diving equipment that they didn't previously have access to. At the same time, of course, Russian or Soviet diving equipment is getting increasingly old and there's no investment or limited investment in new types. But also in 2014, the annexation of Crimea and subsequent sanctions. That closed the door to legitimately sourced Western special forces equipment. They probably have still been able to source some gear through civilian dual use or through other countries and so on, or going around sanctions. But broadly speaking, the supply of Western gear was actually before 2014. Going back to the video, this is a still from it. It's quite interesting. This is a diver in a wetsuit manhandling a diver propulsion vehicle. There's three things of interest in this photograph, or this still of the video. The rebreather, that's the breathing apparatus. They're wearing something on their chest there. The navigation panel that's on the vehicle, and the vehicle itself, the diver propulsion vehicle. 2 out of 3 of these are Western. So the Russian bit is actually the navigation. Surprisingly, perhaps that's one of the more sophisticated things. This is a Russian model as far as I can identify it. Pretty good confidence on this. Generally equivalent to the Western ones. More interesting, though, is the rebreather, the breathing apparatus. We can tell from the telltale signs of the controls for the oxygen bottle. I'm trying to think what you'd call them, knob, I suppose. That's an Italian OMG seal. Quite a good rebreather, typical of Western militaries, and in fact exported generally. We know that Russia was supplied them before Sochi. In 2018, there was some more video of Russian special forces, again, propaganda video. This is before the war, obviously, operating out of Tartus in the Mediterranean, showing off various skills, including wearing the Italian rebreathers. Again, there's the Rotinor diver propulsion vehicles in the top left photo. The diver propulsion vehicle, here's another shot of it. That is German, as far as I can identify. I've got reasonable confidence of this. That's a Bonex DPV, either a Discovery or an Infinity model. They're very similar. Now, this is quite interesting. It's also used by Western special forces, in particular the German ones. This is a reference image of German combat swimmers. It's generically similar to ones that are supplied to many armed forces around the world, but it's also supplied on the civilian market. So is it possible that if these are recently acquired, then they could have been acquired through civilian, but they may have been acquired through military? Okay. The attack itself. Firstly, there's the limpet mine. That limpet mine is actually Russian in origin or Soviet in origin. It's a UPM limpet mine. It attaches with magnets ordinarily, and it's got anti-tamper devices. So if you try taking it off, it will blow up. It's about 14.5 kilograms with a 7 kilogram high explosive warhead. I showed you the image earlier of the Soviet divers. They're carrying the same limpet mine. That's why I chose that picture. The attack, the video had some overhead drone imagery, which appeared to show or highlight the vessel that was attacked. They put a red circle around it. You can see it there. Being able to geolocate that to somewhere on the Dnipro River. Just before I show the location in more detail, note that the drone footage, the grass is very lush. There's no ice on the water. The trees are green and so on. I haven't been able to identify exactly when the attack took place, but it's definitely last year in the summer. It's not very recent. There's now ice and there's been snow and so on. So using OpenStreetMap, we can locate it to Nikopol, and apologies for my pronunciation. That is not been in the news that much, but it is opposite the nuclear power plant that has been in the news a lot. Okay, so the attack likely took place across the river, not seaborne, and so the divers that we saw entering the water, if that footage was of the actual attack and not just training, then they would have got into the water, and they could go several nautical miles quite easily using those diver propulsion vehicles, even if there's a strong current. In the video, there's an attack. This is a spurt of water. I haven't been able to confirm whether they did actually attack it and whether it's successful, but it seems entirely plausible. What it does tell us, though, is that the Russians are still using the Western sourced equipment. And the basic reason for this is because it's better than their own equipment. And even if it wasn't, their own industry to build that equipment had been neglected in the years after the fall of the USSR and is not really in a place to supply the same quality. So it's quite interesting that you're still using Bonex diver propulsion vehicles, Italian rebreathers, and so on. Okay, so that's what I'm going to say. As I said at the beginning, it's unscripted, it's unedited. Apologies for any errors that caused that way. But thank you for listening. If you like it, please like, subscribe, all the usual stuff that people say. Thank you very much.